Welcome to the eShopper Reviews Podcast, episode 19. This is the podcast for October 2022. I'm Jenn and I.
And I'm Jake McNeil.
For those new to this podcast, eShopper Reviews is a subreddit on reddit.com where Jake reviews games on the Nintendo Switch platform, and you can find this subreddit at the URL reddit.com/r/eShopperReviews. We currently have over 1,900 reviews and counting, and we are supported by your donations on our Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. This month's sponsors are Andy Miller, Xleen, Johannes, Homer Simpin, Ilya Zarev, Eli Goodman, Christopher Wolf, Gabriel Coronado Medina, Francis Obst, and Seth Christianfeld. Thank you all for helping to keep the reviews coming. Now on to the patron-voted game, which...
Game's up because we actually now have multiple patron votes. We have our standard monthly patron vote for those who donate $5 or more, and we have our new all-patron budget game vote, which is open to anyone who donates any amount on our Patreon. And as the name implies, those are budget games, games that are normally just $1 or $2 on the eShop, but that pretty much everyone overlooks because they're $1 or $2 on the eShop. But who knows, there might be some hidden gold there. So for our monthly patron voted game, the normal patron vote, we actually had a 5-way tie. We don't really have a winner this month, so this is one of those months where I get to choose for myself which of those games I want to review. And I will review one of them. But I want to take this as an opportunity to say we do have patrons who donate $5 or more who didn't participate in this, and your vote could have swung this vote one way or another. So if you have any interest in these games that we're putting out there as a, hey, which of these are you interested in hearing about, please vote in the vote, make your voice heard, and you could make the difference between me reviewing a game you're interested in or some other game. So,
do we have a winner for the budget game?
We do. With that one, we actually had a few people chiming in. In fact, I believe the vote was unanimous. People wanted to find out about Words with Freds. And I know nothing about this game. I knew nothing about it when I put it up for the vote. In fact, I knew nothing about any of the budget games. But I thought, well, it sounds interesting. Let's see how it is. So I will be reviewing Words with Freds at some point in October, probably in early October. Usually I'm good about reviewing those early in the month.
So next month's votes, though.
Yes.
Those are interesting, the games that you have lined up.
So for next month's vote, for the main vote, I have a bunch of games that are coming out in, I want to say it's either in October or November. Basically, some of these games will have been released by the time the vote concludes, and some of them will be coming up shortly. I figured a good mix of those because we've got a lot of heavy hitters coming out over the next few months. So let's see which of those we can get out of the way. So did you want to read those, Jen?
Yeah, real quick. We have Nier Automata, The End of Your Ha Edition, No Man's Sky, Harvestella. Is that Harvestella?
Yeah, Harvestella.
Okay, Harvestella, It Takes Two, and Sonic Frontiers.
I figure this is a good variety. We have some RPGs in there. We have a massive open world space exploration game. We have the new open world Sonic game. Maybe a little bit of a little bit of something for everyone, I would hope. And I think, if I'm counting correctly, that is 5 games. So, yeah, go ahead and when I post this, I'll probably post it within maybe a week or so of posting this podcast. And let your voice be heard. Vote for whichever one interests you.
Oh, and we also have the all-patron budget game vote.
Yes.
And those games include Lo Bufo, Windmill Engine, Vampire Dungeon, Robbie's Adventure, and Spin Path.
Once again, I know nothing about any of these games. I'm going in completely blind. The only reason I picked these 5 was they have interesting sounding names, and they are all games that have come out this year. So if you're curious about these budget titles and one of them sounds like it could be interesting, go ahead and give it a vote. And this vote is open to anyone who donates. So please feel free to just pop in and vote.
So, we'll move on to the highlights?
Yes, let's.
Okay, so eShopper reviews covered the month of September 2022. Just a note here, these are not necessarily games released in September, but games reviewed in the last month, and we'll start by talking about the worst games.
You know, you never start with the best games these days.
No, I don't.
You feel like leading up to it, is that the whole idea?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you have quite a list for the worst games this month.
You know, I didn't think it was going to turn out this bad, and then I was looking through it, and I was like, actually, there were a fair amount of stinkers this month.
The first one in the worst games category is Game of Dragons.
I really wanted to like Game of Dragons. It has some really gorgeous art in this game. Like really beautiful, like hand-painted art that makes it look like it could be impressive. But that's kind of one of the problems here, is that the art style in this game is wildly inconsistent. You have that really good art, and then you have some kind of cheesy, mobile-looking art. This is a free-to-play game, and it has a lot of ideas behind it, and I do credit the game with trying to be original, which is definitely important, and man, I wish that something this game had tried had worked, but it's just a confusing mix of stuff that just doesn't work and doesn't come across. It's incomprehensible is the word I kept coming back to. I was doing good in my battles, but I had no idea if what I was contributing to those battles is why I was doing good. And I want to take a moment and say right now, if you're hearing little noises in the background, it's because Jen's dogs are skittering around the place.
And having lunch.
Yeah, apparently. So I apologize for that if you're getting that. But I figure, at the very least, this has to be better than the frustrating sound distortions, the constant stuff that was going on in the last podcast. So I apologize for that. Hopefully this is better.
The second one in this category is Punch Man Online.
Hey, look at that. Another free-to-play game. This one is not as ambitious or interesting as Game of Dragons. It is at least more playable, but that's also because it is just basic and boring. It's a bunch of players, not even many. Like you would think you have something super simple. Maybe you'd go for something like Fall Guys, where you'd have hundreds of players in a lobby at once. No, this is only 4 players in an online lobby, and all you're doing is trying to punch the other players off a platform. And it doesn't make that concept any more interesting than it sounds. It's really just as tedious and boring as it sounds. But on top of that, it's ugly. The graphics are extremely unimpressive. And despite that the graphics are unimpressive, it has performance issues. If you have a super low poly game that does not look good, why are you having performance issues? So, yeah, it might be free to play, but it is not worth your time. There are other free to play games on Nintendo Switch that are much, much better.
Dancing Dreamer.
This is another one where I wanted to like it more than I ended up doing. It's visually a good-looking game. This is a music rhythm game that has you going down a path and you're steering left or right to try and avoid obstacles and stuff. But it is so unforgiving and so difficult that I can't imagine most players playing this for more than a few minutes without just throwing their hands up in frustration and just saying, screw it, I'm done. So it could have been a better game. It really could have been. It had a lot going for it, but in the end, it's just not very playable.
Slice of Life.
Speaking of a game that had a lot going for it and could have been a much better game, this game has all the trappings of a game like Golf Story, where it combines its sport with a kind of fun, cartoony RPG style thing with a focus on plot, and a lot of what it does in that kind of area of things is really good. It has this whole character relationship system where your character gets perks based on how you've built up your relationships. It has a really nice art style with some really good pixel art visuals. The problem is it does everything well except the tennis, which
Ooh.
is kind of a big deal in a tennis game. The actual tennis itself, the hit detection isn't very good. The movement is slow and plodding. I could not, for the life of me, figure out how you're supposed to aim in this game. It's just a terrible game of tennis, which is frustrating for me to say because all the other stuff it does is really good. It's just the actual gameplay itself is terrible, which, I mean, that's kind of important.
Onto the hidden gem,
Only one hidden gem this month, unfortunately.
which is Cross the Moon.
This one kind of surprised me. I didn't know anything about this game going in. I didn't have any expectations. And what I discovered is this game is a visual novel with a story about vampires, and specifically in a contemporary age. I would liken it to True Blood, because like True Blood, it takes place in a modern day where vampires have integrated with our society more or less. They drink a blood substitute, much like in True Blood. And this is a murder mystery told from 3 different perspectives. You have the perspective of a few different vampires, and then a human police officer who's investigating these crimes. And I really liked that this felt like a lived-in world. Like there was a lot going on in this world well before we started this story. And the characters are interesting. I think if you are the kind of person who enjoyed True Blood, this is going to be right up your alley. If you just like vampire stories in general, this is going to be worth looking into. I should note, though, this is not a visual novel, rather, where you have choices. It's just you're reading and enjoying the art and the kind of atmospheric, I guess, soundtrack. So if you're looking for a visual novel where you make choices that matter, this game is not so much that. But it has a good story, and if you're interested in story, worth looking into.
We have one noteworthy review, which is Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers Edition.
This one, I wouldn't put it in the best games, wouldn't put it in the worst games, and it's certainly not a hidden gem because it's a re-release of a huge mega hit game. This was actually the patron-voted game for the prior month, and I've talked about it a few times previously. Basically, I'll try and make it short. I like Chrono Cross. I think it is a good RPG. I think it is a flawed RPG. It has multiple issues with its plot, with its characters, with its gameplay. Definitely not with its soundtrack. It has an absolutely heart-wrenchingly gorgeous soundtrack. This is one of the best video game soundtracks ever made, in my opinion. But this game is also a sequel to Chrono Trigger, which is, I would argue, one of the best, if not the best, JRPGs of all time. And coming after that, it was kind of a disappointment. However, I will note, this game also included the first Western release of Radical Dreamers, the visual novel follow-up to Chrono Trigger. And while I have mixed feelings about Chrono Cross, I like it, but I'm also disappointed in it. My feelings about Radical Dreamers are pretty clear. Yeah, I hate it. I do not like it. It is... The characters are really hateable. The actual gameplay is hidden from the players, so you can't really tell what your choices are influencing in terms of the behind-the-scenes stuff in the game. There's a lot of tedious walking back and forth, a lot of events that just don't really seem to have anything to do with one another. It's just, oh, now I'm in a fight with this random creature. Now I'm in a fight with this random creature. All done through story choices rather than actual RPG gameplay. In the end, though, what really got me about this one is just I hate the characters in this game. You have one person she's a hyper-violent and uncaring jerk. You have one character who's callous and also a jerk. And then you have the main character, your point of view character, who is basically just obsessed with the girl and trying to impress her. And that's pretty much everything that his character is just, oh yes, this hyper-violent jerk of a girl, I really want to get in her pants. Given that this was the follow-up to my favorite JRPG of all time, I could not be more disgusted with what they tried to do with the story. And if you are someone who has only ever played Chrono Cross, trust me, that was a better follow-up to Chrono Trigger, despite that Chrono Cross was disappointing. Ugh.
So, moving to the best games, so that you can get that taste out of your mouth.
Yes, thank you.
You have two.
Yes,
the first one is MLB The Show 22.
This is my pick for my favorite Nintendo Switch game that I've reviewed in the month of September. And this one's kind of interesting because this is a game that's made by Sony. I'm sure the only reason that we're playing it on Nintendo Switch is because the MLB folks insisted that they had to publish it on every major platform, which is why we're getting it on both the Switch and on the Xbox. But I'm glad that they did because it is a heck of a great baseball sim. On the Nintendo Switch, there is another baseball series that I really enjoy. It is not the other simulation series. It is actually the Super Mega Baseball series. It is really, really good, but it's also kind of cartoony, and people who are looking for more of a realistic take on the sport have not had much in the way of a good game to go for until now. I mean, there's been the RBI series, which is not horrible, but it's not great. MLB The Show, though, is not just the best baseball simulation game on the Nintendo Switch by default, although it is the best by default. It's also a genuinely great baseball simulation. It is a great game.
The second one in this category is Grand Mountain Adventure Wonderlands.
This is a top-down skiing and snowboarding game where you are trying to accomplish multiple goals on a more or less open world, like a small open world mountain, where you can choose your course. This game, more than anything, reminded me of the classic PC game Ski Free. I'm not sure, Jen, if you would remember that. Nope. It might be before your time.
Might have been.
It was back when they released these entertainment packs on Windows. And, you get to choose which way you'd go down on the mountain, and then at the end of the mountain, you'd get eaten by the abominable snowman. There's no abominable snowman in this game, but it's still a really great kind of open snowboarding skiing game. Really beautiful graphics too. Really, like, you can see the trails in your snow, and there's nice little details, like if you walk by if you pass by an NPC, some of them are like whistling, and you can hear them whistling. It's cute. It's really adorable.
Okay. Now to talk about Nintendo Switch Online expansion packs, Sega Genesis app releases for September 2022. I always hate saying this.
It is a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, and it's so awkward. But anyway, here are the releases. We have Alicia Dragoon, Beyond Oasis, and Earthworm Jim.
So I'll start by saying, by the time this podcast comes out, I'm guessing we will probably have the new Nintendo 64 game as well. But it didn't come out in time, so I'm not talking about it in time. So I guess I'll have to talk about that in next month's podcast. As for these three games, of the three, Beyond Oasis had previously been available to play on the Nintendo Switch via the Sega Genesis Classics, or I've forgotten the name of the bundle, but you could already play it on Nintendo Switch. The other two games are new to Nintendo Switch, though. Alicia Dragoon it's an interesting action platformer, but it's also, the controls are clunky and it's not great. And I also had issues with Earthworm Jim. Interestingly, we had Earthworm Jim 2 on the Super Nintendo app previous to this, And I feel like a lot of my problems with that game I have with this one too, which is so with this game specifically, I have problems with the hit detection and the level design is just kind of almost random, where it's hard to tell where you're supposed to go. Sometimes you have leaps of faith you need to make. And while the game has a lot of character and really great animation, it's just not fun to play, in my opinion. And so I feel like all three of the games in the Sega Genesis app this month are kind of duds.
Let's talk about something a bit more enthusiastic.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, something that we were looking forward to.
Okay.
I know the Nintendo Direct just aired.
Just aired for us, well, maybe a week ago or so.
A week ago, about. Yeah.
By the time you folks hear this podcast, it'll be a few weeks older than that. But yeah, we watched the Nintendo Direct together, and I think looking at opinions online, there were some people who were really disappointed at how RPG heavy and in particular how farming game heavy this Direct was.
Yes.
But I like RPGs and I sometimes like farming games, so I was pleased with this Direct. There were a few complaints that I had, but we'll get to those in a moment. So I suppose we can go through and talk about all the different games that were revealed here. So you want to talk about the first one?
So Fire Emblem Engage is coming out January 20th, 2023. I am not familiar with the series. However, I will say that the artwork looks pretty good.
Yeah.
I think this announcement would have a bit more oomph or impact for me if I actually knew what the game was about.
Well, for those who aren't familiar with the Fire Emblem franchise, these are strategy RPGs, which I know is not really Jen's jam.
Nope.
This is a game that we actually had spoiled for us prior to this Direct. Some screenshots of the game leaked out online. And from the looks of things, it looks like a much less ambitious game than Fire Emblem Three Houses was. It looks like it'll be good, but I don't think it's going to wow anyone like Three Houses did. I'm sure I'll play it sooner or later, but it's not like super high on my, oh my goodness, I need to play this list.
It Takes Two comes out November 4th, 2022, and this game I've been meaning to play, actually.
Yeah, I've heard so many good things about this one. Like, I've heard this is an amazing co-op game.
Oh, yeah, and I kind of want to shoot myself in the foot for not playing it already, but I've heard very good things. I can't wait for it to come to the Switch.
Yeah, when this came out, I believe it came out just last year, it got a few Game of the Year awards. That's how good it is. So, yeah, definitely looking forward to playing it, and it's coming out in November.
So one of the other things that this Direct did a lot of was announcing re-releases and remakes of previous games.
Quite a lot, yeah.
Yeah, a lot. One of them is Fatal Frame: Mask of the Lunar Eclipse.
Although, for most of us Americans, you could be forgiven not realizing that this is a remake because we never got this game released in the US. This was originally released on the Wii, and this is the first time, I believe, that this game is being brought to the States. So I know a lot of people really enjoy the Fatal Frame games. They are survival horror kind of games where the gimmick behind the game is that you're fighting ghosts and you're fighting them by taking pictures of them with a spiritual camera.
Yes. I am very intrigued by this, but I also know that I'm a bit of a pansy and probably will just scream at everything.
Yeah, I know you and horror don't really
We don't get
well.
along. No, we don't. Next up is Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Expansion Pass Wave 2 coming October 13th, 2022.
Yeah, they just revealed a new character and some new enemies and stuff that you'll be fighting. I have not yet played Xenoblade Chronicles 3, so there's not really much I can say about this.
SpongeBob SquarePants The Cosmic Shake comes out 2023.
This was another game that we had known about previously. They just showed off some new footage, and I'm not a big SpongeBob fan.
Neither am I, but,
yeah.
it's for the kids.
But it looks nice.
Fitness Boxing, The Fist of the North Star, March 2023.
This just struck me as from out of left field. What? I want to be in the board meeting where this idea first came up, where they're like, hey, we have this fitness game where you're punching using the Joy-Cons and motion control to exercise, and we normally have it to music, and we've had a couple of entries, but what could we do to shake it up? I know. How about this really old anime franchise where now you're going to be punching characters from the... I don't know. It doesn't sound like a bad idea. It just seems weird and, like, totally unexpected.
I have no understanding of this franchise or whatever, so...
You haven't played any of the fitness boxing games?
I don't think so, no.
I'll have to get you to try them.
Maybe.
I mean, it's a music rhythm game where you are doing, like, uppercuts and jabs and straight punches in time with the music.
Oddballers coming early 2023.
This looks like it's going to be a pretty good bet for another game to add to your party game rotation. We were already talking about how that seems like it's... Well, I mean, I don't want to pass judgment on it yet, but it looks good.
Tunic, September 27th, 2022.
This game is another one that got a lot of raves when it released on the Xbox, and everyone at the time pretty much said, oh yeah, this seems like the kind of game that's going to be hitting the Switch pretty soon. And sure enough, here we have, it's coming to Switch. For those who aren't familiar with Tunic, it is kind of a bit of a Zelda-style game, but the gimmick behind this game is that you are uncovering pages of the instruction manual for the game as you go through the game, which is telling you how to do, stuff. So it's a really cute kind of fourth wall breaking sort of thing. I'm looking forward to it. I've heard good things.
So we have Front Mission 1, 2, and 3 being remade. The first one comes out November 1st of this year, and the second remake comes out 2023, and there is a to-be-announced date for number 3.
So we already had the first two games announced previously, but we didn't really have a date nailed down. So this is a first that we're getting more of an idea of when they're coming out. These two are also strategy RPGs featuring mechs. However, this is the first time we've had an announcement that Front Mission 3 will be coming to Switch. And I'm really pleased to hear that because I know that they expanded the series when it came to the third entry. That one was originally released on the PlayStation, and I never got my hands on it myself, but I heard some cool things about it. Like they had this whole simulation of the internet where you could find secret pages and get unlock stuff for your mech. I don't know. It sounds cool. I'm looking forward to trying these games.
The first of the farming games that were announced.
Yeah, going to be a lot of farming games we're going to talk about here.
Story of Seasons, A Wonderful Life, Quarter 3, 2023. So it got a little bit difficult for me to keep each of these farming games in my mind as their own thing. Story of Seasons, I remember it as, okay, you are not immortal in this game. You do grow old. And the people around you grow old.
I'm unclear on whether this is a remake or an entirely new game. Their language didn't really clarify that for me, so I don't know. It looks nice. I don't know if it looks like it has some sort of wow factor that you wouldn't find in any other farming RPG, but it looks nice. I don't know why we needed to hear about it so early when it's coming out late next year.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But this next game, I know you're looking forward to.
Oh, this was one of my highlights of the entire Direct.
Octopath Traveler 2, February 24th, 2023.
I loved the first Octopath Traveler. It is a beautiful JRPG. This was, I believe, the first game where they made use of the HD 2D kind of visual style. And kind of combining pixel art graphics with really nice lighting and shadows, nice water effects, nice atmospheric effects to kind of breathe extra life into that pixel art style. And it looks gorgeous. It has a beautiful soundtrack. And the sequel looks like it's going to be upping the ante even more. Like all sorts of stuff moving around in these environments, all sorts of like playing around with the depth where you're moving, into and out of the background. Um, and 8 all new characters. I don't know if it'll have any direct attachment to the characters from the first game, but it doesn't really need to. And one of the things that gives me a lot of hope for this one is it seems like they were hinting at, with the language they were using, they were hinting that they might be addressing one of the bigger problems that people had with the first Octopath Traveler, which was you had 8 different characters, each with their own story, and they ended up joining up together. But all of their stories kind of seemed separate from each other. They didn't really mesh well together. And in this one, they kind of indicated that the stories would have more coalescing with each other, I guess. So I'm looking forward to that. Even if that doesn't end up being the case, I'm sure this will still be a must-have JRPG.
Fae Farm coming Q2 2023. I am looking forward. This is one of 2 farming games I'm looking forward to. Mainly because this is multiplayer.
I know you really look for multiplayer in your farming RPGs.
Yes.
I like the art style in this one. It's a bit simple, but it's clean. I do like that it has the multiplayer.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't checking. Did you see if that's just online multiplayer? Did they say if they had local multiplayer too?
I don't remember, but I'm looking forward to it either way.
Mm-hmm.
Next up is Theater Rhythm Final Bar Line, February 16th, 2023.
So, I both love and hate that this game was announced, and I'll tell you why.
Really?
I love that this game was announced because the 2 prior Theater Rhythm Final Fantasy games are incredibly good music rhythm games, and I am so pleased that this series is coming to Switch. Here I thought that they'd just kind of do a sort of iffy, maybe sort of like it game in the Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory game, which I wasn't super thrilled with for a few different reasons. Like, it's okay, but not quite what I wanted.
Right.
But the Theater Rhythm games, like, the gameplay in them is good, but what is really fantastic about them is that they have hundreds, literally hundreds of songs from the Final Fantasy franchise. And that is a series that is full of amazing music. We're talking about some of the best video game music ever made, and tons and tons of it. So I am thrilled beyond thrilled that they are expanding the series on the Nintendo Switch. There's going to be even more songs. They're going to have Octopath Traveler songs in it. They're going to have Live Alive songs in it. Oh, I'm so happy about that. And yet, what I'm not happy about is, because I'm reviewing Nintendo 3DS games, I went and bought both of the Theater Rhythm games that are on the 3DS and reviewed them right before this game was announced.
Oh,
and now I'm like, I really didn't actually need to review them at all because this one looks like it's going to make those 2 games obsolete. I wish I could have saved my money on that.
Maybe you could return them.
No, they're digital copies.
Oh, well, never mind then.
Yeah. But that's fine. At the very least, I know this is an amazing series, and I'm super excited to play the next game in the series. I hesitate to say the 3rd game, because the Theater Rhythm series has had multiple entries, and not all of them are Final Fantasy. Like, they had a Dragon Quest game that never got released in the United States, unfortunately. So Theater Rhythm is kind of bigger than Final Fantasy, but as far as we in the West have seen, it's only been Final Fantasy games, which is okay because, I mean, there's still amazing music, and honestly, I love the Final Fantasy music way more than I've ever liked anything Dragon Quest.
Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, October 20th, 2020.
We already knew this was coming. We already knew when it was coming. This was just more or less a reminder of, hey, this is coming out soon. We want you to get it. You want to get it, right? Get it. And yeah, I want to get it. It looks good. So yeah, that's coming.
Rune Factory 3 Special 2023.
I was kind of surprised about this one. Like, we already got Rune Factory 4 Special, And then they released Rune Factory 5, which kind of disappointed people because of performance issues. And now they're going backwards in the series to previous games. But it looks good. I imagine it'll be a good game. I mean, Rune Factory 4 was, so hopefully this is a good sign. However, they did something else interesting with this announcement, which was they announced a new franchise, sort of? Like, they said that they are in the works for a new Rune Factory franchise. And I have no idea what that means exactly. Like, is it a spin-off of the Rune Factory games? They didn't announce any specific titles, just, oh, hey, we're working on a Rune Factory something.
I guess we'll find out in the next coming months.
I guess, and hopefully it'll perform better than Rune Factory 5 did.
We have several upcoming games for the Nintendo 64 app, some of which I'm very excited about. These include Pilot Wings 64, Mario Party 2, Mario Party 3, Pokemon Stadium 2, 1080 Snowboarding, Excite Bike 64, and the big one, Golden Eye.
Okay, let me start with, you probably wouldn't be able to guess which of these games is the one I'm most excited to see come to the Nintendo Switch.
Snowboarding?
No. I just reviewed that one on the Wii U, and I like it. I think it hasn't aged. The graphics have aged surprisingly well, given that it's a Nintendo 64 game. The gameplay, not so much. It's a very unforgiving snowboarding game. You want to give it another shot?
Pilot Wings?
Yes. I love Pilot Wings 64. I think it was a tragically overlooked game in the Nintendo 64 launch. Overlooked because, I mean, next to Super Mario 64, of course people were going to look past that for Super Mario 64. But it was a really great game in its own right. Had some really fun flight physics. I really liked the soundtrack. I'm really happy to see that coming to the Nintendo Switch Online and 64 app.
I am excited about the Pokemon Stadium games, and I'm slightly excited about Golden Eye.
So the Pokemon Stadium games, I'm kind of wondering how that's going to work, since the big gimmick with those games was that you could take your copy of Pokemon Red or Blue or Pokemon Gold or Silver for Pokemon Stadium 2 and pop it into, there was a little accessory you could plug into the N64 controller so that you could transfer your Pokemon into the game and use your own Pokemon from the mainline games in the 3D stadium. And since that's not, there isn't any way to play the Game Boy games on your Nintendo Switch as of the moment, makes me wonder if they're just going to say, you're just not going to do that here. Just deal with the stuff that's on the cartridge.
Yeah.
That's a very distinct possibility. However, there's a part of me that wonders, is there a chance that maybe we could see Game Boy games coming to Nintendo Switch Online? It's been rumored for years. I don't know. I wouldn't put too much hope in that, especially because the Pokemon Company hates giving away their mainline Pokemon games. You don't, like, even when they had it on Virtual Console on the 3DS, for example, you had to pay double what you would for any of the regular Game Boy games to play one of the Pokemon games. So, I don't know, it's possible, but it seems like it's a long shot. However, long shots do occasionally happen, and GoldenEye is a very distinct example of that. I know on this very podcast I have previously said that I was highly skeptical of GoldenEye ever releasing on the Nintendo Switch. And that's because of the complicated rights issues that go along with it. In order for this to happen, you need to have Nintendo, Microsoft, and MGM all agreeing to it. But I guess they must have worked out some kind of deal behind the scenes to make it happen, which is great, but... So here's the thing. I've not played GoldenEye in a little while, but even the last time that I played it made it pretty clear This is not a game that has aged well.
Nope.
This is one of the early great first-person shooters, which I know I say great because at the time it was great. It had all kinds of options that you'd never seen, like all kinds of multiplayer stuff, tons of unlockables, and just the scope of this game was magnificent for a first-person shooter at the time. However, by today's standards, I think a lot of people are going to have a very rude awakening. The controls in this game were miserable. I mean, they kind of had to be because the Nintendo 64 controller only had one analog stick. Granted, in its defense, the game provided players with multiple control schemes, including one where you could use two controllers so you'd have two analog sticks.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe for this release, they will do something to update the controls. Don't pin your hopes on it. But the other issue is this game also had really nasty frame rates in its original release. Again, it's possible they could update it, but don't hold out your hopes for it. I would say have very, very low expectations for GoldenEye, because if they just do a straight port of the game and release it as it was in its original release, yeah, this is not a game that has aged well at all.
Next up is Various Day Life, which is already out now.
Okay, so one of the things that Jen and I were noting as we were watching this Nintendo Direct was, man, Square Enix has a lot of stuff coming out on Nintendo Switch. Yeah. Like, they have just put a ton of games on Switch throughout this year and still just keep going and going and going. And it's not even like they're just churning out garbage or, just being lazy about it. Although, I mean, stuff like Chrono Cross and Chocobo Racing, not so great. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, they've also had really good stuff too. Like Live Alive, nobody was expecting that. And that was a really great game. Various Day Life looks good. Looks like a JRPG. I don't know that I can say much about it.
Factorio is coming out October 28th, 2022. You would think this would be a game for me because it's a management game.
Yeah.
But aesthetically, it does not appeal to me. But I know it's a very good game based on the reviews.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people telling me that Factorio is a real simulation management kind of game. So, yeah, looking forward to that one.
IB, Q2 2023.
You're talking about how an art style could put you off of a game. And I gotta say, the art style for IB does not do it for me.
It's very eclectic and eccentric.
It's eccentric, yeah, and it has kind of a lo-fi, like, almost like childish scribbles using pixel art kind of style to it. And I get that it's kind of a personal preference thing. It's not that the game is just bad or anything. It's just, it doesn't super appeal to me.
Mario Strikers Battle League gets a second free update with Diddy Kong and Pauline, September 2022.
Yeah, I haven't reviewed Mario Strikers yet, so I can't really say too much about this. I mean, visually it looks good, but yeah.
Atelier Ryza 3, Alchemist of the End and the Secret Key, February 24, 2023.
This one really surprised me, and in retrospect it shouldn't have, because the Ryza games are the biggest success that the Atelier franchise has ever had. They do very well, at least as far as the franchise goes, both commercially and critically. They sell well, and they've gotten really good reviews. And with this one, it looks like they might, maybe, be heading more in the direction of an open world game. It's hard to tell for sure. They've toyed around with kind of semi-open worlds in the Atelier franchise before, but it would be really interesting to see them bring an open world to the Ryza games, which are already really, really excellent JRPGs.
Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Pack Wave 3 comes holiday season, And then Nintendo Switch Sports gets a golf update this holiday season.
Yeah, they had a lot of little updates that they were talking about in this direct. Looks good. I'm curious to see what the other tracks they'll have for the next Booster Pass wave are, because they only showed 2 tracks, and they usually release like 8 in these waves. They'll have 2 sets of 4. So it'll be interesting to see. I will say I am glad that they are bringing over as many of the Mario Kart Tour tracks as they have previously, because those are tracks that up until now have been exclusive to the mobile game, which is kind of a microtransaction hellhole, as I understand it.
Pikmin Bloom is available now for smartphones, which is basically Pokemon Go.
Man, I can't help but feel like Nintendo and Miyamoto were trolling people when it came to this. Like, everybody is wanting to hear about the next major Pikmin game, and we're going to talk about this Pikmin mobile game that's been out for years now, and we're going to talk about it at length. And I know Arlo in particular, I don't know if Arlo listens to this podcast, I doubt it, but Arlo in particular has been waiting for the Pikmin 4 announcement for ages, and I have to imagine this was just torture for him, having to listen to Pikmin Bloom being talked about for, just way too long. And even, okay, if you're not into Pikmin and you had to sit through all this Pikmin Bloom talk, I'm sure this was just boring as heck. But for people who are into Pikmin, this was probably torturous. But then
Pikmin 4 gets announced.
Okay, so this is actually one of my biggest complaints about this direct. It's the 2 biggest announcements in the whole direct. They barely showed any gameplay of.
Mm-hmm.
This game and the last game in the direct, which we'll talk about later. Like, for this game, they didn't even show gameplay. They showed,
a poster.
So they showed, an image of a character just chilling in the background, and then the logo popped up. And then they showed a screen grab of the image. Oh, and of course, we can't forget, because it's so important that they had to talk about it, Miyamoto's t-shirt. Because of course, we couldn't see actual gameplay of the game before we got introduced to the amazing t-shirt. Like I said, Nintendo was trolling super hard with this. But at the very least, we know it's coming. We know it's coming in 2023. And everybody who's been waiting like a decade for the next major Pikmin game can finally look forward to the actual release.
Just Dance 2023 edition is coming out in November, November 22nd, and I am a little bit peeved about it.
Oh?
So I was introduced to the Just Dance series through the Xbox Connect, which had a wonderful way of mapping your movements and stuff, and it was fairly accurate. And I don't get that with the Switch.
I can't speak to the Xbox experience because I didn't play that version myself.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do think that the controls in the Switch version are not super accurate. Technically, the game will let you play using either the Joy-Cons, or you can use your mobile phone and shake your mobile phone around, and I get that they're working with what they've got. It's like, what else can they do?
Right.
But at the same time, yeah, it doesn't make for a compelling gameplay experience when you're not even feeling like your actions are translating well into
Exactly.
the game. And I feel like with each entry into the Just Dance franchise, they're not really changing much. It's just like, oh, and here's a new bunch of songs to play the same gameplay to.
Mm-hmm.
For people who are fans of the series, I'm sure... Well, I'd say I'm sure you're happy, except, I mean... It's not like this is a big surprise. Hey, they are doing a new game in a game that comes out every year.
So the next one is a game that I am looking forward to.
Mm-hmm.
Harvestella, November 4th, 2022.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it too. It looks gorgeous, but we've talked about this at length.
Yes.
We've been looking forward to this for a good portion of the year now, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. And Bayonetta 3 comes out October 28th, 2022.
I mean, again, looking forward to it. The first two games were fantastic. There is something that they announced alongside this, which is apparently they are, for the first time ever, releasing the first Bayonetta game in physical format. So this is the first time they'll be releasing the very first Bayonetta in physical format. Given that this is eShopper reviews and I tend to focus on digital games, that's not a big deal for me. Although, at some point, I'm going to need to start getting more physical games just to save space. But I know there are people out there who prefer to get games in digital format, so that might be a way to go for them. But at the same time, a part of the nice thing about Bayonetta 1 and 2 was that buying one gave you a discount on the other. And I'm not sure if they're continuing that discount for this release. I think this is going to be for a very slim portion of gamers who really need their games in physical form and don't care about spending a little more for that.
Next up is Master Detective Archives Raid Code, Q2 2023.
They said this is coming from the folks who made the Danganronpa series, and I've not played any of those games yet. I know that they are very well liked. This game looked interesting. I don't know that there's much more I can say about that. It looks like it could be a fun detective, visual novel, graphic adventure style game.
Resident Evil Village Cloud, October 28, 2022, plus Winter's Expansion DLC, December 2nd, 2022.
So, I mean, we might as well go through the whole list. They announced a bunch of Resident Evil games coming.
They have Resident Evil 7 Biohazard Cloud version, Resident Evil 2 Cloud version, and then Resident Evil 3 Cloud version.
So, on the one hand, I'm not super happy with cloud games on Nintendo Switch.
I think like a lot of people don't like having a cloud version of anything, no matter what platform.
It defeats the purpose of a handheld portable platform if you have a game that requires you to be next to a Wi-Fi hotspot.
Mm-hmm.
However, having said that, I feel like this, more than many of the games that have come to cloud, or that have been made in cloud versions on Switch, this is understandable. Because I just don't think there was any way that you were going to get Resident Evil Village 2, 3, or maybe even 7. Those are all games that I feel like they're graphical powerhouses. And you're just not going to get that on Nintendo Switch without huge sacrifices to that.
Agreed.
So, while I'm not super thrilled about them coming to Switch in this form, I kind of understand, and I don't think it's a terrible idea. It's better than not getting them at all.
Sifu comes November 8th, 2022, which is more or less like a punching game.
Punching game.
I mean,
it's a very simplified way of looking at it. It's a martial arts game.
Yeah.
You play a character who's fighting various other characters.
And you enter in combos to kill your opponents.
Something like that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know this came out on Xbox. It was one of the big, or was it PlayStation? No, I'm not sure. I think Xbox. I want to say Xbox. In any case, I think I remember hearing that it's supposed to be good, but yeah, I don't know much about it.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, December 13, 2022. This follows, what's his name? Zack. That's what I thought.
So this is a prequel to Final Fantasy VII. I know that a lot of people really would have liked to have gotten the Final Fantasy VII remake on Switch, and I mean, with all the Resident Evil Cloud versions coming, it's possible we might see a cloud version of Final Fantasy VII come to Switch. But at least until then, this looks like a good alternative, I will say. And this doesn't even appear to be a cloud version, which I'm pleased with. And kind of surprised about, because graphically it looks very nice.
Yes, it does.
Although, as I understand it, I think this is a remake of, I want to say, a PlayStation Vita game. So,
actually, that's very possible.
Yeah, I look forward to playing this. I'm not the biggest Final Fantasy VII fan in the world, but this one looks good.
We have Radiant Silvergun, which is already out now.
This game is kind of a legendary shmup. It's one of the more well-regarded games in the genre. I don't think it's as well-regarded as Karuga, which is already on Switch. But I mean, great that we're getting it on Switch. It is another excellent addition to the Switch library.
Endless Dungeon is coming out 2023.
I know nothing about this game, but it looks good. I'm interested to play it.
It has procedurally generated floors, apparently.
Yeah, it looks like it might be kind of like a Diablo-style game, but with procedural generation, like you're saying. Yeah, looks good. I look forward to trying it.
Tales of Symphonia is getting remastered and will be released early 2023.
I know that this is one of the more well-regarded games in the Tales franchise, so good that we're getting it on Switch. It looks kind of weird by today's standards, though. All the
I mean, a little bit, but
deformed characters.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's not terrible.
No, it's not terrible, and I'm sure it's still a good game underneath the
Life is Strange Arcadia Bay Collection, September 27th, 2022.
We knew that this was coming to Switch, but it kept getting pushed back, so it's good to have an actual date for it. Interestingly, coming like almost a year after the most recent Life is Strange game came out on Switch, I believe.
Romancing Saga Minstrel Song Remastered, December 1st, 2022.
I am not intimately familiar with all the games in the Saga franchise, but that's in part because I've never been super thrilled with them. They've always, at best, seemed okay. This one looks good, but, I mean, it's a Saga game, so I feel like if you are a fan of that franchise, then maybe this will be something to look forward to, and if not, maybe not. I don't know.
Lego Brick Tales 2022. They're fairly fun.
I'm curious about this one. I'm not sure what the gameplay is like. Like, it looks like it involves some amount of level building. I don't know. I guess I'll have to play it and find out.
Disney Speedstorm 2022, which to me is just Mario Kart with a Disney skin.
It looks kind of similar to that. This is being made by the same folks who make the Asphalt series. So I would definitely expect kind of a cartoony, or not cartoony, an arcadey rather, style of gameplay. Hopefully they don't overload it with microtransactions. I know that was one of the issues that people had with the Asphalt game that's on the Switch. But if they can manage to do that without getting too far into the ugly monetization, it could be really good. We already knew about this game prior to now. It's interesting that they brought it up again in this Direct, but didn't give it a specific date. They just kind of confirmed that it is coming out this year. It's coming out in 2022. So I kind of wonder what's going on with that. Like, are they looking to surprise everyone with just suddenly releasing it? I don't know. We'll see.
Fall Guys Season 2 is coming September 15th, which is already out now.
Yeah, by the time we're recording this podcast, that's already done and gone.
Yep.
Or not gone, but it's already out. I don't know. I'm not actively playing Fall Guys at this point.
I like Fall Guys, but no, I'm not actively playing it. It seems like a party game.
I like it, but I mean, for it to be a party game, you'd have to have local
multiplayer.
And it
True.
doesn't really have that.
Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, February 24th, 2023.
This is a remake or remaster of another Wii game. And, man, Kirby's just been on fire lately.
Oh, yeah. A cute little puff ball.
Kirby's Return to Dreamland, I actually reviewed the Virtual Console version of that on the Wii U. And I don't recall the score I gave it, but I remember I thought very highly of it. It's one of the better Kirby games. So, definitely worth getting.
And lastly, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, May 12th, 2023.
So, before I start talking crap about this game,
oh goodness,
let me say this is possibly my most anticipated game right now. I am super looking forward to it, and I have very little doubt that it will be an incredible game. I don't know if it'll live up to Breath of the Wild, but it looks great. Having said that, I have two issues with this particular announcement. Number one, they spent the longest time refusing to tell us what the title of this game was. And they said, oh, we can't tell you the title of that because that'll be a huge plot or gameplay spoiler. Now that you know that the title of this game is The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Jen, do you feel like the plot has been spoiled for you? Jen, do you feel like some major gameplay feature has been spoiled for you?
I don't think so. Okay, so here's the thing. I find it very odd that there is a sequel to Breath of the Wild because to me, it seemed like the story ended there. So to me, it feels really awkward that there is a sequel to Breath of the Wild. Um, Tears of the Kingdom sounds like it's probably related to something to like Zelda and her lineage or something.
Maybe? I don't know. It could be related to the land and all the stuff that's happening to the kingdom.
Yeah.
So I feel like we were misled about how the title was supposed to be some big deal here.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is, after all this wait to see the game in action, we got, what was it, maybe 10 seconds of actual gameplay footage here?
Just about, yeah.
Like,
just about.
I'm still super looking forward to this game, but this was a really disappointing reveal.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Ever since Arceus kind of disappointed me, I'm trying not to be super hyped and excited about a game that's coming out.
I mean, I always try not to be super hyped and excited about any game, but at the same time, like, it's hard not to get caught up in the enthusiasm, especially when it's a sequel to a game that you love.
Right, and I feel like I need to pick up Breath of the Wild again. Just
you mean just start playing the game again?
Yeah, maybe. Was that the one you looked forward to the most?
Was that the what?
The game that you looked...
Game?
Yeah.
At this point, it's probably... Tears of the Kingdom is probably the Nintendo Switch game that I am most looking forward to at this time.
Okay. What out of the farming games, which one do you want the most?
I kind of like the same things that you like about them. The multiplayer does seem like something important, but also like I like the bit of combat mixed in there as well. So the Rune Factory games have always appealed to me in that respect.
And Harvestella has the combat.
Harvestella is my number one pick.
Yeah.
It looks so beautiful. I really look forward to seeing what that game has in store for us.
Are you looking forward to any of the rhythm games that were announced?
Rhythm games plural? Like the only one that was in that direct was Theatrhythm. Oh, that's right, Just Dance.
Yeah.
I mean, I've already said Theatrhythm looks really, really good. It's always been a good series. Just Dance, yeah, I could take it.
You know, and I hate that there are people who are probably too young to even know this reference, but gosh, I miss Dance Dance Revolution so much.
Jeez, yeah, it has been a while since we had a new DDR game come to consoles.
Yeah. Well, mainly because you have to get the placemat, you know?
Do they still make them in arcades, do you know? I wonder.
Are arcades still alive now?
There are
a few.
Yeah, it's not as major a phenomenon.
Nope. Kids these days don't know what it feels like to go into an arcade.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the DDR games myself too.
I
always sucked at them, but
I loved them.
But they were fun.
Yeah. I will tell anybody right now, if you make a DDR game, I will just eat it up.
You would tell anyone. The company that makes the DDR games is Konami, and that's maybe part of the issue. Is Konami in recent years have kind of turned their back on video games somewhat. Yeah, they have not made much in the way of new games. Basically, all they've done recently has been Bomberman games and collections of their classic games. Like we got the Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection, and we got the Castlevania Advance collection.
Right.
And to be fair, incredibly good collections of games. I haven't played the Cowabunga collection yet, but I've heard good things. California. The Castlevania Advance collection is outstanding. And the other collections that they've released have consistently been excellent. They've been some of the best game collections to come to Nintendo Switch. But when it comes to releasing new games, yeah, Konami just doesn't seem that interested at this point.
Okay, but in terms of music rhythm games, I feel like if there isn't a physical element to a music rhythm game, it's not worth it to me. Like, I loved DDR because it got you moving. I loved Rock Band and Guitar Hero because you had to move around and you had to play a guitar.
Oh, I love Rock Band myself. I have, probably like 2,000 songs in my version of Rock Band.
So seeing like the theater rhythm game, the Kingdom Hearts melody game, like just sitting there pressing buttons.
I mean, that's what you do for most video games.
Yeah, but it doesn't get you moving around.
So, I will say that while the games that we're talking about here, Dance Dance Revolution, Rock Band, I really enjoy those. Those are some of the best music rhythm games I've played. I have to argue with you on this. There are other music rhythm games where you just use a controller that are some of the best games.
I mean, Demo, right? Is it Demo?
Well, with that, it's mostly you're using the touchscreen. So on Nintendo Switch, there are 3 games where you're primarily using the touch screen if you're playing it the best way, in my opinion.
Right.
And that is Demo, Voez, and Citus Alpha. And all 3 of those are incredibly good. Demo, you get this really great feeling like it's not simulating playing a piano, but it really does reproduce that feeling like you're playing a piano very well. Voez, I really like because of the great presentation. It's really bouncy, and the notes that you need to press are jumping all over the screen. Really fun. And they just added, I want to say 50 new songs to that game just within the last month or 2. They're still adding content to it, which is crazy. It's already got tons and tons of songs in it, and they're adding more. If you like music rhythm games and you have a Nintendo Switch and you play it in portable mode, get Voez. Get Demo and Citus Alpha as well, but Voez. Thumper is another great game where you use a controller. Crypt of the Necrodancer, really inventive music rhythm game with roguelike elements. However, I can go back to before the Nintendo Switch. The Frequency series, Frequency and Amplitude on the PlayStation 2. These were games made by Harmonix before they made Guitar Hero. And they have this great feeling of building up a track part by part as you're moving through it. Oh, now I'm playing the drum line, now I'm playing the vocals, now I'm playing the guitar. And you can choose the order you play them in, and it makes it kind of a different mix every time. Really, really great games. And then on the 3DS, the Theatrhythm series, and I actually like the Hatsune Miku game that came out on the 3DS.
Really?
Yeah, I wasn't too thrilled with the Nintendo Switch Hatsune Miku game, but the one on the 3DS, I actually, they overloaded it with all sorts of extras and features that I thought really put it above and beyond. So I feel like there are definitely good... Oh, and Gitaru Man on PlayStation 2. That's another... Yeah, you look at me funny, and it is a very weird game, but it's got an amazing soundtrack, and it's fun to play.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I understand that I am very particular when it comes to my music rhythm games, but that's just how I am. If there's not a really good physical element to it, I'm not interested. But yeah, I think that wraps things up for this month's eShopper Reviews podcast. Again, we want to thank all of our patrons on Patreon for contributing. Patreon donors are the first ones to gain access to these podcasts, and if you're interested in becoming a donor, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/eShopReviews. And once again, if you're curious to read any of the reviews or content mentioned in this podcast, you can find it on the eShopper Reviews subreddit at reddit.com/r/eShopperReviews. Once again, this has been Jenn and I.
And Jake McNeil.
We'll see you next month, and in the meantime, we both hope you found this content helpful and enjoyed some good games. Catch you all next time.
Later!